Once a year in the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom, a month is dedicated to the awareness of Black history in America. That month is February. It started as Negro History Week back in the early 20th century, the brainchild of historian Carter G. Woodson. Then in 1976, at the prompting of Black student groups, President Gerald Ford designated February as Black History Month, and every president since has followed suit. So every year, school children dutifully write essays about everything from the first Black player in Major League Baseball, Jackie Robinson, to Martin Luther King's historic march on Selma 50 years ago. But the question that keeps coming up is, why once a year? As the actor Morgan Freeman has said, Black history is American history. Well, civil rights attorney Charles Coleman, Jr. has been giving this question a lot of thought. Charles, welcome to the show. You know, the value of celebrating Black History Month, I think, is quite simple, a rhetorical question. We are still systematically excluded from the history books.
Sure. I think that in 2015, though, there's an added value that we have with respect to celebrating Black History Month, and that is moving beyond just a conversation of achievements and firsts, and actually contextualizing it in a way that not only continues to foster a sense of pride and also inform larger communities about our contributions, but also allows us to take control of our narrative and redefine who it is we are as a community to the outward world.
But see, that's so important, Charles, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, the narrative and the conversation even amongst people of color themselves, because there's this talk about the outrage among some over this new TV series Empire,
sure,
and how it's so stereotypical,
right,
and I have to say this in airing our dirty laundry in America, American blacks, we kind of let the lowest common denominator of our ethnicity determine and rule and identify who we are.
Right.
And that's horrible.
And that's why a conversation around Black History Month, and particularly what it means in 2015, can be critically important. It can springboard into a lot of other conversations as long as we involve the right people. It has room to involve our elders, because our elders are the ones that have not only an understanding of what actually happened when it comes to the first, Jackie Robinson being the first Major League Baseball player, but also the context around what was the mindset that it took to achieve that. And they're the ones who can impart that to the generation that is currently, sort of in control today, as well as the youth. And so being able to have that conversation across generations is a way to sort of springboard into a better conversation that sort of starts to avoid those things you talked about.
The mindset of what it took to overcome racism in athletics, the mindset of what it overtook to come racism, say, in the entertainment world. But I got to tell you, Charles, I'm tired of hearing the shucking and jiving, the tap dancing, and look, my wife is a jazz singer.
Sure.
God bless her. But I want to hear more about other substantive things that blacks have been involved with, which took even more to overcome, in science and technology and all the things that we've been involved with that no one knows about, especially our own people. And that's why there's this narrative. As this one, was an Italian police officer in New Jersey, said, well, Black history, you can just put that all in 5 minutes.
Right.
Absolutely preposterous.
Absolutely. And I think that what you've said is why Black History Month can't only be the only month that we're talking about the contributions of Black people, not only here in America, but globally, because there's so much that we have done, and our narrative is such a rich one that when we only limit it to a month, or we think that, well, this is just a month to sort of go over what it is that we've achieved, and we start with Rosa Parks and we end with President Obama, that's something that does us as a community a strong disservice. You're right, there's so much that we have to discuss. There's such a rich history, there's such a rich context, and it requires us to constantly be in conversation about it. So hopefully this is just where it starts, not where it ends.
And I think race is still an issue here, and although this is more a political thing in terms of, there's most recently in the news, a lot of people are talking about this President Obama's speech before the National Prayer Breakfast, where he makes a statement about, Christian involvement in atrocities around the world. I'm a Christian minister. I understand that all too well. I'm just wondering, if he were of a different skin color, perhaps, sometimes we can be sensitive, would this be such a huge issue when it's more a political issue than a racial issue? Your response, your thoughts.
Well, it's very interesting that you asked that within the backdrop of Black History Month and what we're talking about, because as far as I'm concerned, President Obama sort of holds the trump card with respect to firsts and first achievements, being the first Black American president. Now, obviously, he has faced an unprecedented amount of resistance, and I think that this is an example of that. I would argue and agree with you that a lot of this is racially fueled, and particularly when he also used the comment about Christianity being used to defend slavery. I think that's something that a lot of Americans don't want to talk about. I think it's something that, as a black American, he's keenly aware of, and the fact that he was attacked for bringing it up only indicates even more so the level of resistance that even as the first African-American president, he continues to face in that office.
Absolutely, and of course, we still have an uphill battle in this country, despite what some people may think. But I'm hoping that perhaps systematically more people of color like you and me will be included in the history books one day. And I'm not just talking about tap dancing and blowing a trumpet.
Absolutely, one can only hope.
Okay, Charles Coleman, as always, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks a lot, Julie.
Okay, and of course, you're watching Arise Review.